restricted to major Air Force Command headquarters. This interest was not caused by any revolutionary information that was revealed in the briefings or reports. It stemmed only from a desire to get the facts about an interesting subject. Many aspects of the UFO problem were covered in these official briefings. I would give details of many of the better reports we received, our conclusions about them, and how those conclusions were reached. If we had identified a UFO, the audience was told how the identification was made. If we concluded that the answer to a UFO sighting was unknown, the audience learned why we were convinced it was unknown. Among the better sightings that were described fully to interested government groups were the complete story of the Lubbock lights, including the possible sighting of the same V-shaped light formations at other locations on the same night, the story of a group of scientists who detected mysterious nuclear radiation when UFOs were sighted, and all of the facts behind such famous cases as the Mantell incident, the Florida Scoutmaster who was burned by a flying saucer, and headline-capturing sightings at Washington, D.C. I showed them what few photographs we had, the majority of which everyone has seen, since they have been widely published in magazines and newspapers. Our collection of photographs was always a disappointment as far as positive proof was concerned, because, in a sense, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. We had no clear picture of a saucer, just an assortment of blurs, blotches, and streaks of light. The briefings included a description of how Project Blue Book operated and a survey of the results of the many studies that were made of the massive UFO data we had collected. Also covered were our interviews with a dozen North American astronomers, the story of the unexplained green fireballs of New Mexico, and an account of how a committee of 6 distinguished United States scientists spent many hours attempting to answer the question, are the UFOs from outer space? Unfortunately, the general public was never able to hear these briefings. For a long time, contrary to present thinking in military circles, I have believed that the public also is entitled to know the details of what was covered in these briefings, less, of course, the few items pertaining to radar that were classified secret and the names of certain people. But withholding these will not alter the facts in any way. A lot has already been written on the subject of UFOs, but none of it presents the true, complete story. Previous forays into the UFO field have been based on inadequate information and have been warped to fit the personal biases of the individual writers. Well-meaning though these authors may be, the degree to which their books have misinformed the public is incalculable. It is high time that we let the people know. The following chapters present the true and complete UFO story, based on what I learned about UFOs while I was chief of Project Blue Book, the Air Force's project for the investigation and analysis of UFO reports. Here is the same information that I gave to Secretary of the Air Force, Thomas K. Finletter, to the Air Force commanders, to scientists and industrialists. This is what the Air Force knows about unidentified flying objects. You may not agree with some of the official ideas or conclusions. Neither did a lot of people I briefed. But this is the story. End of Chapter 1. Recording by Roger Moline. Chapter 2 of The Report on Unidentified Flying Object. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects by Edward Ruppelt. Chapter 2. The Era of Confusion Begins. On September 23, 1947, The chief of the Air Technical Intelligence Center, one of the Air Force's most highly specialized intelligence units, sent a letter to the commanding general of the then Army Air Forces. The letter was in answer to the commanding general's verbal request to make a preliminary study of the reports of unidentified flying objects. The letter said that after a preliminary study of UFO reports, ATIC concluded that, to quote from the letter, "the reported phenomena were real." The letter strongly urged that a permanent project be established at ATIC to investigate and analyze future UFO reports. It requested a priority for the project, a registered code name, and an overall security classification. ATIC's request was granted, and Project Sign, the forerunner of Project Grudge and Project Blue Book, was launched. It was given a 2A priority, 1A being the highest priority an Air Force project could have. With this, the Air Force dipped into the most prolonged and widespread controversy it has ever or may ever encounter. The Air Force grabbed the proverbial bear by the tail, and to this day it hasn't been able to let loose. The letter to the commanding general of the Army Air Forces from the chief of ATIC had used the word phenomena. History has shown that this was not a too well-chosen word. But on September 23, 1947, when the letter was written, ATIC's intelligence specialists were confident that within a few months or a year they would have the answer to the question, what are UFOs? The question, do UFOs exist, was never mentioned. The only problem that confronted the people at ATIC was, were the UFOs of Russian or interplanetary origin? Either case called for a serious, secrecy-shrouded project. Only top people at ATIC were assigned to Project Sign. Although a formal project for UFO investigation wasn't set up until September 1947, the Air Force had been vitally interested in UFO reports ever since June 24, 1947, the day Kenneth Arnold made the original UFO report. As Arnold's story of what he saw that day has been handed down by the bards of saucerism, the true facts have been warped, twisted, and changed. Even some points in Arnold's own account of his sighting as published in his book, The Coming of the Saucers, do not jibe with what the official files say he told the Air Force in 1947. Since this incident was the original UFO sighting, I used to get many inquiries about it from the press and at briefings. To get the true and accurate story of what did happen to Kenneth Arnold on June 24, 1947, I had to go back through old newspaper files, official reports, and talk to people who had worked on Project Sign. By cross-checking these data and talking to people who had heard Arnold tell about his UFO sighting soon after it happened, I finally came up with what I believe is the accurate story. Arnold had taken off from Chehalis, Washington, intending to fly to Yakima, Washington. About 3:00 p.m. he arrived in the vicinity of Mount Rainier. There was a Marine Corps C-46 transport plane lost in the Mount Rainier area, so Arnold decided to fly around a while and look for it. He was looking down at the ground when suddenly he noticed a series of bright flashes off to his left. He looked for the source of the flashes and saw a string of 9 very bright disc-shaped objects, which he estimated to be 45 to 50 feet in length. They were traveling from north to south across the nose of his airplane. They were flying in a reversed echelon, that is, lead object high with the rest stepped down. And as they flew along, they weaved in and out between the mountain peaks, once passing behind one of the peaks. Each individual object had a skipping motion described by Arnold as a saucer skipping across water. During the time that the objects were in sight, Arnold had clocked their speed. He had marked his position and their position on the map and again noted the time. When he landed, he sketched in the flight path that the objects had flown and computed their speed, almost 1,700 miles per hour. He estimated that they had been 20 to 25 miles away and had traveled 47 miles in 102 seconds. I found that there was a lot of speculation on this report. Two factions at ATIC had joined up behind two lines of reasoning. One side said that Arnold had seen plain, everyday jet airplanes flying in formation. This side's argument was based on the physical limitations of the human eye, visual acuity, the eye's ability to see a small, distant object. Tests, they showed, had proved that a person with normal vision can't see an object that subtends an angle of less than 0.2 seconds of arc. For example, a basketball can't be seen at a distance of several miles, but if you move the basketball closer and closer, at some point you will be able to see it. At this point, the angle between the top and bottom of the ball and your view of a second of arc. This was applied to Arnold's sighting. The Arnold saw airplanes faction maintained that since Arnold said that the objects were 45 to 50 feet long, they would have had to be much closer than he had estimated, or he couldn't even have seen them at all. Since they were much closer than he estimated, Arnold's timed speed was all wrong, and instead of going 1,700 miles per hour, the objects were traveling at a speed closer to 400 miles per hour, the speed of a jet. There was no reason to believe they weren't jets. The jets appeared to have a skipping motion because Arnold had looked at them through layers of warm and cold air, like heat waves coming from a hot pavement that cause an object to shimmer. The other side didn't buy this idea at all. They based their argument on the fact that Arnold knew where the objects were when he timed them. After all, he was an old mountain pilot and was as familiar with the area around the Cascade Mountains as he was with his own living room. To cinch this point, the fact that the objects had passed behind a mountain peak was brought up. This positively established the distance the objects were from Arnold and confirmed his calculated 1,700 miles per hour speed. Besides, no airplane can weave in and out between mountain peaks in the short time that Arnold was watching them. The visual acuity factor only strengthened the Arnold saw a flying saucer faction's theory that what he'd seen was a spaceship. If he could see the objects 20 to 25 miles away, they must have been about 210 feet long instead of the poorly estimated 45 to 50 feet. In 1947, this was a fantastic story, but now it is just another UFO report marked unknown. It is typical in that if the facts are accurate, if Arnold actually did see the UFOs go behind a mountain peak, and if he knew his exact position at the time, the UFO problem cannot be lightly sloughed off. But there are always ifs in UFO reports. This is the type of report that led Major General John A. Sanford, Director of Intelligence for Headquarters Air Force, to make the following comment